On the night before our wedding, he told me he was tired of me, then posted pictures with someone new. I left the country without a word. 10 years of love erased in a moment. But in Florence I found myself, and a man who taught me that real love doesn't hurt. Now I'm marrying him with my ex watching from the crowd. And this time I say, I do, to someone who never made me beg to be chosen. There's something about birthdays that makes you hope for magic even when you know better. I sat at the edge of my perfectly decorated vanity, watching the soft glow of fairy lights bounce off the mirror. Everything was just as I imagined it would be, streamers in muted champagne tones, a cake from that patisserie Brandon once raved about, and a tailored powder blue dress chosen for one reason only. It was the shade he once said brought out my eyes. It was supposed to be a double celebration. My 28th birthday and our 10th anniversary. A milestone. A promise. I had envisioned candles, laughter, and the warm brush of his hand on mine as we toasted to a decade of love. But the room was silent. No footsteps. No knock on the door. Just the sound of my own heartbeat getting louder with every passing minute. I checked my phone. 8:03 p.m. I had booked the private lounge at Arcadia, the same place Brandon and I went on our first official date. A nostalgic gesture, one I hoped would remind him of how far we'd come. He hadn't come home the night before either. Said he had a client meeting that ran long. Said he'd make it up to me. But then lately, everything had to be made up for. I opened the small silver box on my dresser. Inside were the custom cufflinks I had made for him. 10 small diamond dots lined across the brushed titanium, one for each year we'd spent together. I even had them engraved. You plus me equals 10 years strong. I felt ridiculous just reading it. So I held on to hope. Maybe traffic. Maybe surprise. Maybe something I couldn't explain but would forgive anyway. At 8:30 I stood, grabbed my coat and the box and headed out. The heels I wore clicked crisply on the pavement as I walked toward the car. Outside, the city hummed in weekend anticipation. Somewhere in it, Brandon was out there too. I just needed to believe he was on his way to me. When I arrived at Arcadia, the manager greeted me with a hesitant smile. Miss Hayes, the party's already started in the lounge. I blinked. Already started? He nodded. Mr. Reed and a few guests arrived about 20 minutes ago. Would you like me to walk you in? No, I said quickly. I know the way. He nodded and disappeared. I followed the sound of muffled music and laughter, every step heavy with confusion. Why hadn't Brandon told me he was already here? He knew this was meant to be a surprise. For him. I reached the hallway leading to the private lounge. The door was cracked open just enough for sound to leak through. She's just an old hag now, Brandon's voice said. The words stopped me cold. Laughter erupted. Don't you know today's her birthday? Someone said. And your 10-year anniversary, added another. Of course I know, Brandon replied, chuckling. I just don't feel like seeing her. A chorus of laughter followed. I took a breath. Maybe I misheard. Maybe this was some sick joke. I stepped closer. Honestly, someone slurred, Olivia's still hot. But Brandon, Manitoba, you've got so many options now. Oh please, another chimed in. What about that intern? What's her name? Vanessa. There was a pause. Brandon exhaled like he was lighting a cigarette. She's still around. She's more interesting than Olivia. I can't bring myself to let her go just yet. The laughter this time was louder, drunker. But what if Olivia finds out? One of them asked. He scoffed. What's she gonna do? Cry? I never planned on marrying her anyway. That was it. My hand tightened around the box in my palm until it hurt. My stomach twisted, a cocktail of humiliation and heartbreak churning in my gut. I backed away from the door like I'd just seen a ghost. Or maybe I was the ghost. A decade of my life reduced to background noise in someone else's celebration. Outside, the wind had picked up. A chill sliced through my coat like it wasn't even there. I walked past the bar, past the entrance, down the block. I didn't remember where I was going. I didn't care. Then I saw her. Vanessa. She stepped out of a black car wearing a slim red dress and strappy heels, her arm linked with one of Brandon's friends. Her hair was curled into soft waves and her smile was effortless. She passed me like I didn't exist. Just like that, I became invisible. It started to rain. I didn't have an umbrella. I stood at the edge of the curb as water soaked through my dress and into my shoes. Mascara bled down my cheeks. The silver box in my hand felt heavier than bricks. I walked for hours. No destination. No logic. Just me, my broken heart, and the storm. People passed me on the sidewalk, some concerned, some indifferent. A cab driver asked if I needed help. I shook my head. I couldn't speak. If I opened my mouth, I would scream. I ended up sitting at a bus stop bench outside a shuttered bookstore, hands folded tightly in my lap like I was praying for an answer. The rain had soaked through every layer of my clothing. My skin felt numb, but my chest ached like someone had carved me out from the inside. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that I had wasted 10 years. 10 birthdays. 10 Christmases. 10 summers and winters believing that love meant waiting. Believing that if I gave enough, stayed loyal enough, sacrificed enough, I'd eventually be chosen. But I was never the choice. I was the placeholder. The safe bet. I leaned back against the glass and laughed, a small broken sound that startled me. Then I cried. Not loud or messy, but quietly, completely, like my soul had finally decided to weep. I didn't text him. I didn't call. I didn't send a message demanding answers. As I already had them. Somewhere deep inside me I had always known. This wasn't a relationship. It was a slow erasure. And tonight I was the one finally willing to admit it. I looked down at the silver box in my lap. My hands trembled as I opened it one last time. The cufflinks sparkled beneath the dim streetlight, mocking me with their pristine perfection. 10 diamonds. One for each year he made me believe I mattered. I placed the box beside me on the bench and left it there. By the time I reached home, the rain had slowed to a drizzle. The house was dark, silent. Brandon hadn't even bothered to return. I walked to the bedroom, peeled off the wet dress, and stood in front of the mirror once more. My makeup had melted. My hair was tangled. My eyes were red. But my gaze, steady. I stared at my reflection for a long time. Then I whispered to her, "No more." And for the first time in 10 years, I meant it. 2 days after my 28th birthday, I watched Brandon Reed publicly flaunt another woman like I had never existed. Her name was Vanessa Lynn. She wore red lipstick and carried herself like a trophy on his arm, delicate, polished, and impossibly young. In the photo, she was smiling into his shoulder, a flute of champagne in one hand, her other hand resting against his chest. Caption read, "To new beginnings." They were at the Eden rooftop bar. Our spot. It had only been 48 hours since the night he humiliated me. 48 hours since he laughed about me being an old hag behind a cracked door. But here he was, wearing the same shirt I had bought him last Christmas, toasting a new chapter with a girl who still pronounced Chardonnay like Chardonnay. The internet ate it up. His friends flooded the post with fire emojis, winks, and congratulations. A man upgraded. She's so much better than Olivia. This one suits you. Suit him? I scrolled through the comments while sitting on the edge of our bed, the same bed where I once traced constellations on his chest and whispered dreams into his neck. Now it felt cold, unfamiliar. Like a hotel room someone else had slept in before me. A ping. Group chat. Nicole, Liv, are you seeing this? Me, yes. Nicole, I'm gonna kill him. Rachel, want me to send someone to burn his building down? Me, tempting. Me, but no. Let him post. Let him perform. What hurt the most wasn't the betrayal. It was how easy it was for him to forget me. 10 years. Erased with a new girl and a ring of likes. Over the next few days, their relationship became a curated performance. Vanessa posted mirror selfies wearing Brandon's hoodie. He reposted her photos with captions like "She's my piece," and "What I should have had all along." The man who used to forget my birthday now celebrated hers early with a Cartier bracelet. He took her to the Maldives, a trip I had begged for years. Not the right time, he always said. But for her it suddenly was. Worse, people applauded him for it. My inbox was full of whispers. "Wow, you must feel awful. Vanessa is so fresh and vibrant. Do you regret wasting your prime on him?" Regret? Oh. I mourned. There's a difference. I wasn't angry. I didn't storm into his office or post passive-aggressive stories or tell the world he was trash. Instead, I walked into our apartment and started packing. Our bedroom closet held a graveyard of memories. Scarves he never wore. Photo albums he never opened. Cards I had written, each signed with a heart that only I believed in. I found the box I'd hidden under the bed, the one containing our engagement scrapbook. It was filled with receipts from dinners we shared, Polaroids of anniversaries, the torn ticket stub from our first flight to New Orleans. And in the center of it all, the wedding dress catalog I had used to sketch my dream gown. The real one arrived that evening. A courier knocked just as I finished folding the last box. I stared at the sleek white package stunned. It was the dress. The one I had spent 6 months designing. A blend of silk chiffon and illusion tulle with embroidered lilies down the train. Brandon always said lilies reminded him of my grace. I believed him. When I opened the box and touched the delicate fabric, I felt nothing. No excitement. No pain. Just nothing. It was stunning. And completely meaningless. I stood in the center of the room, still in my jeans and sweater, and stared at it for a full minute. Then I reached for the scissors. The first slice felt wrong, sacrilegious almost. But then the second came easier. And the third. Fabric shredded like paper. Seams ripped apart with a pop. I cut it into strips until all that was left was a heap of silk and thread that no longer held a future. The veil I burned. The photos I tossed. The ring. I walked to the balcony, looked down at the city that had seen me cry too many times, and threw it into the night sky like a stone over a cliff. When I came back inside, I didn't cry. I made tea. And sat quietly watching the ashes of my forever settle in the trash. The next morning I looked at myself in the mirror. Not a girl. Not someone's maybe. Just Olivia Hayes. Tired. Sober. And finally ready. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my recent calls. His name was still there. Professor Green. He had called 3 months ago, offering me a scholarship slot for a master's program in Florence. I had declined. Because Brandon needed me here. Because we were going to get married. Because this was home. I pressed the call button. It rang once. Olivia. I'm ready to go, I said simply. Silence. Then a long sigh. Good. Florence is waiting. I didn't say goodbye to anyone. Not my parents. Not my so-called friends who still partied with Brandon. Not even Nicole and Rachel, not yet. I needed this to be mine. My exit. My escape. I booked a flight for the following Thursday. One way. The day I left, it rained again. Of course it did. I walked through the terminal wearing the only coat I had left. The beige trench Brandon always said made me look too serious. I like serious now. I sat by the window before boarding, sipping burnt coffee and watching the raindrops race each other across the glass. For the first time in 10 years, I didn't have a man waiting on the other side. No promises. No expectations. No one to call when I landed. And yet I felt light. Hollow in the best way. Like someone had finally carved the rot out of me, leaving only bone and truth. When my flight number was called, I didn't hesitate. I stood up and walked toward the gate. Without looking back. Florence looked nothing like home. And that was exactly what I needed. The buildings wore centuries on their backs like medals. The cobblestone streets twisted with purpose, leading to stories I hadn't lived yet. There was something in the air, thick with the scent of espresso and old books, that made me breathe deeper, stand taller. I arrived with 2 suitcases, a folder full of sketches, and a heart so hollow it echoed when I moved too fast. Professor Green had arranged everything. Housing near the university. My studio access. Even a weekly appointment with a woman named Lucia who called herself a design therapist. Whatever that meant. I didn't fight it. I didn't want to feel anymore. So I let myself be consumed by my work. Days bled into nights inside the studio. I painted. I sketched. I reimagined every broken memory as fabric and thread. I didn't check my messages. I didn't open social media. And I didn't say Brandon's name out loud. Not even once. A month passed. Then December came quickly. The narrow streets shimmered with lights and ornaments strung between the stone buildings. Locals bustled with scarves around their necks, holding roasted chestnuts in paper cones. I kept my head down mostly. Until Nicole, bless her chaotic soul, sent me a voice note with way too much cheer. You can't hide in Florence forever, Liv. Even ghosts deserve to dance at Christmas. That same afternoon, one of my classmates slipped an invitation into my notebook. End-of-year international mixer. Small low-key. Not optional. And so I went. The apartment was tucked above a bookstore and smelled faintly of ginger and aged paper. A small group of former students and exchange designers huddled in the warm living room, sipping wine and speaking in a hybrid of Italian, English, and French. I stayed near the window, cradling a glass of red wine and listening to the snowfall. I should have left early. But then the door creaked open. And he walked in. Ethan Walker. Time had not ruined him. If anything, it had only sharpened him. The same clean jawline. The same dark hair that always fell just a little out of place. He wore a grayish-brown coat and a black scarf, his boots dusted with fresh snow. He was taller than I remembered. But what hadn't changed was the air around him, commanding, quiet, cold. The room stirred with low murmurs. Is that Professor Walker came? He never comes to these. Of course he didn't. Ethan Walker wasn't the kind of man who did casual appearances. He was Florence's golden prodigy, a man who skipped grades like stepping stones and launched his first capsule collection at 22. He taught now, judged competitions, and refused to take on students no matter how they begged. He didn't look at anyone. Except me. Our eyes met across the room. And then, to the shock of everyone, he smiled. Barely. But it was there. He walked straight toward me. Olivia Hayes, he said, voice low and smooth. It's been a while. I blinked. Ethan Walker. You remember me. I never forget people who ignored me in college hallways. He laughed. Not the cold, calculated chuckle people said he had, but something real. I wasn't ignoring you. I was avoiding everyone. Charming. You were in Professor Green's seminar, weren't you? I nodded slowly. Sketching with watercolors. You were the one who won the Florence scholarship. You were the one who should have. I paused. That, I hadn't expected. We stood there for a moment, memories threading silently between us. Ethan nodded at my nearly empty glass. Leaving. I looked at the door. Then back at him. Maybe. Unless you're planning to start a scandal by talking to the girl you once ghosted in a sketch lab. Scandals are overrated. A silence. Comfortable this time. Want me to walk you home? He asked. I hesitated. Then nodded. The streets were dusted with snow and the air bit through our coats. Ethan held an umbrella tilted toward me, but his own hair and shoulders were soaked with melting flakes. You're bad at using umbrellas, I muttered. Hard to walk side by side and hold it properly. So walk slower. He turned toward me, gaze unreadable. You're still blunt. You're still guarded. That's fair. We fell into step. The world had gone quiet, the way it does when snow muffles the chaos. Our boots clicked gently on the stone, and the buildings looked softer somehow under winter's weight. I heard about what happened, he said finally. Back home. My shoulders tensed. It's old news. I'm sorry. I didn't answer. Instead I asked, what brings you to a party full of strangers? He shrugged. I was told someone important would be there. And did they show? His eyes met mine. Yes. I looked away. As we reached the courtyard of my building, I turned toward him, unsure what to say. But before I could find the words, he said, I missed my chance when we were 18. I froze. Snow clung to his lashes. His hair was damp. His scarf had come loose, exposing the soft pulse in his neck. What? I whispered. I waited, he said quietly. 10 years. My breath caught. Back then I had faced a choice. Ethan, the quiet brilliance I couldn't decipher. Or Brandon, charming, familiar, foolish. I had chosen comfort over curiosity. Safety over spark. And now here we were. Older. Less idealistic. But maybe more honest. Would you like to come up? I asked softly. For tea. He hesitated for half a second. Then unfastened the umbrella and followed me through the courtyard gate. The snow continued to fall behind us. But for the first time in years I wasn't cold. The apartment was quiet when we stepped inside. The kind of quiet that doesn't ask to be broken. Ethan stood in the doorway, brushing snow from his coat sleeves, while I moved instinctively toward the small kitchen. My fingers worked on autopilot, boiling water, grabbing 2 mismatched mugs, opening the tin of chamomile tea I had bought the week before but never used. I didn't ask if he wanted sugar. I didn't ask anything. We didn't need to fill the silence. Not yet. I handed him the mug. He took it gently, his fingertips brushing mine. Even that small touch sent something electric humming beneath my skin. We stood near the window, the only light coming from the small lamp on my desk, casting the room in a soft amber haze. He took a sip. "Too hot," he muttered. I smiled faintly. "You always used to burn your tongue in college. You always used to bring extra napkins in case I did." We both laughed, and for a second it was 18 again, but without the naive optimism. Without the belief that love was simple or easy or guaranteed. "Why didn't we ever talk back then?" I asked softly. Ethan didn't look at me. "Because you chose him." I exhaled. "Brandon." "Of course. I didn't know what I was doing," I said. "He was loud. Charming. He made everything feel easy. And I made everything feel hard? You made everything feel real." He finally turned toward me, and in the low light his eyes looked softer than I'd ever seen them. "You were the girl who always had her sketches finished early," he said. "I was the guy who stayed up all night second-guessing mine." "You never second-guessed anything," I said, tilting my head. "You were a genius." I was terrified. I blinked. "Of what?" He didn't answer immediately. Then slowly, "Of wanting something I couldn't have." I looked down into my tea, watching the steam curl like smoke signals from a fire that never went out. "I didn't choose Brandon because he was better," I said. "I chose him because I thought love was supposed to be loud." He shouted the loudest. "And now I'm realizing silence can be safer." He set his mug down on the windowsill, took one slow step toward me. "You're not over him yet," he said quietly. "No," I admitted. "But I'm getting there." Silence again. Tension, the kind that tightens the air, narrows the room, makes everything ache a little deeper. And then I leaned in. Just enough for him to feel it. To know. To give him time to pull away. But he didn't. Our lips met softly. No fireworks, no gasps. Just warmth. Recognition. Release. It was the kind of kiss that didn't demand anything yet said everything. I had spent 10 years being someone's second thought. This felt like being someone's beginning. Later, as we lay tangled in my sheets, our clothing discarded in lazy trails across the floor, I stared at the ceiling and tried to breathe like this was normal. It wasn't. Ethan lay beside me, one arm tucked behind his head, the other lightly tracing circles on my back. I rolled onto my side. "Are you going to ask if I regret it?" "No. But you're wondering." He didn't answer. So I whispered, "When I was 18 I stood at a fork in the road. You or him. I chose wrong." "You chose safe," he corrected. "I chose scared." He turned to me, propping himself up on one elbow. "So what is this now? Revenge? A distraction?" I looked into his eyes. "Maybe I just want to know," I said. "What would have happened if I chose you?" "That's not fair," he murmured. "No," I agreed. "But it's honest." He was quiet for a long moment. Then softly, "Will you leave again?" "I don't know." He nodded. Like he'd already accepted that I was a temporary dream. That maybe this wasn't forever. But just then something shifted in me. The girl who had waited for Brandon to change. She was gone. The woman who stood here now. She didn't chase. She didn't settle. She chose. I reached for his hand under the blanket, linked my fingers through his and pressed my forehead to his. "We're not kids anymore," I whispered. "Let's try this." His breath hitched. He pulled me closer. No words, no promises. Just two people finally facing the truth. And for the first time in a decade, I didn't feel like a mistake. I felt like a choice. Back home, Brandon Reed was unraveling, and no one could stop him. He still smiled for cameras. Still wore designer suits, arrived at parties with Vanessa on his arm, and posted curated shots of brunches and boardrooms like nothing had changed. But underneath the tailored exterior, something had cracked. And the cracks were widening. He drank more now. Not socially, habitually. Whiskey in his coffee. Wine at lunch. Tequila when the room got too quiet. He laughed too loud at jokes that weren't funny and snapped at waiters for bringing the wrong water. Vanessa noticed first. At first she brushed it off. He was working too much. He missed Olivia, she wasn't blind. But Brandon was Brandon. He always bounced back. Until he didn't. Until the day she came home to find him sitting on the floor of the guest room, surrounded by old photos. Photos of me. He'd dug them out from a box I thought I'd taken with me. The ones from our trip to San Francisco. The engagement photos we'd done just before everything fell apart. Even the blurry selfie I took in bed one morning when he was still asleep. The one he once claimed was his favorite picture of us. Vanessa had stood frozen in the doorway, her voice trembling. Why do you still have these? Brandon didn't even look up. Because she's coming back. She blocked you. She's emotional. She'll calm down. It's been months. She just needs time. Vanessa didn't argue after that. She simply turned, packed her things and left, her silence saying what her pride refused to. Brandon didn't chase her. Not because he didn't care, but because he barely noticed she was gone. Meanwhile, I was starting to breathe again. Florence had become home in a way I never expected. My days were full, not just with work but with color, with rhythm, with meaning. Ethan and I shared a quiet kind of joy. We weren't rushing into declarations or drawing timelines. We worked side by side, ate together at small trattorias, debated fabric textures like war generals, and sometimes sat in silence that didn't feel awkward, only earned. He didn't push. I didn't pretend. We simply were. And that was enough. Sometimes, in the early hours before the city stirred, I'd wake to find him asleep beside me, one hand draped over my waist, his breath steady against the back of my neck. I'd watch him for a moment and wonder how I ever mistook chaos for love. Brandon had been a storm. Ethan was shelter. But back in that storm, Brandon was spinning. He started showing up unannounced at friends' apartments, looking for people who hadn't blocked his number yet. When they opened the door, they'd find him clutching a half-empty bottle and mumbling something about fate, about betrayal, about how she'll see eventually. His friends, the ones who used to cheer him on, laugh at his Olivia jokes, now sighed and exchanged tired glances behind his back. Man, you need help. She's not coming back. You lost her. Just deal with it. Brandon would smile. And then say the same thing every time. She's still mine. You'll see. One night he got drunker than usual. He was at Derek's place, the last friend who still hadn't kicked him out. They were sitting around watching some old college basketball game when Brandon stumbled into the kitchen, tripped on the threshold and crashed into the counter. A glass shattered. So did something inside him. He grabbed a shard of the broken glass and dragged it down his forearm without flinching. Blood dripped onto the marble. Red. Derek swore and rushed over. What the hell, man? Brandon blinked down at the wound like it surprised him. It hurts less than she did. They wrapped his arm, called the in-house doctor and tried to calm him down. But Brandon wasn't listening anymore. He reached for his phone, trembling. She blocked you, remember? Derek said quietly. Brandon growled. Use yours. Derek hesitated, then sighed and handed it over. If she answers, you owe me a new phone. When the call connected, I was standing on the balcony of our apartment in Florence, watching the snow fall in soft spirals across the rooftops. Ethan was inside arranging flowers, badly, for our little windowsill planter. I had told him they were fake. He insisted they weren't. Now he was trying to revive plastic tulips with warm water. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Normally I wouldn't answer. But something made me pick up. Hello. There was a pause. Buffle. Then a voice I hadn't heard in months. A voice that once made my heart race. Olivia. I didn't speak. Please, Brandon said. I messed up. I know I did. But I'm not okay. I'm not eating. I'm not sleeping. I closed my eyes. You don't have to say anything, he continued, desperate now. Just tell me you'll come home. Just come back and talk to me. Another voice interrupted. Firm. Steady. Calm. She's not coming back. I blinked. Who the hell are you? Brandon snapped. This is Ethan, he said simply. And she's mine now. Silence. I could almost hear Brandon's breath catch through the line. Then a roar. You bastard. He launched into a stream of curses so vile I had to step away from the railing. Ethan ended the call without another word. When I turned to him, I saw the concern in his eyes. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded slowly. He's not done. Ethan didn't argue, because he knew it too. Back in that dark apartment, Brandon was shaking. He threw Derek's phone against the wall. Chattered. He turned to the room of stunned faces and said one thing. I'm going to get her back. His voice was no longer pitiful. It was dangerous. Because men like Brandon couldn't handle losing. especially not to someone they thought would always wait. And I, the girl who had once built her entire world around him, I was no longer waiting. Weddings are supposed to be joyful, sacred, untouched. I didn't get that luxury. But I got something better: clarity. Our Florence wedding wasn't grand. No dramatic floral arches or cathedral choirs. It was intimate. A garden courtyard tucked behind a small villa, strung with white lights and warm laughter. No family. No cameras. Just the people who had seen me at my worst and stayed anyway. I had designed my own dress. Not because I was trying to prove a point, but because I knew exactly how I wanted to feel. Strong, clean, honest. No lace, no corsets. Just soft white silk that curved like forgiveness and moved like freedom. Ethan had designed our rings, clean platinum bands with interwoven lines down the center. 2 paths, 1 direction, he'd said, placing the box in my hand. His eyes had been trembling. I had kissed him then. Not because it was romantic, but because he had given me back my choice. And I was choosing him. The guests gathered in quiet anticipation as the sun dipped behind the villa's tiled roof. Ethan stood at the altar in a deep navy suit that matched the glint of his eyes when he looked at me. His fingers twitched at his sides, his shoulders squared, but I knew the calmness was a performance. He was nervous, because he loved me. The priest cleared his throat. "Do you, Ethan Walker, take this woman?" "I do," he said before the priest could finish. The crowd laughed softly. Ethan didn't care. His gaze was on me, steady and awestruck. The priest smiled and turned to me. "And do you, Olivia Hayes, take this man?" The gate slammed open. "Stop!" Gasps. A sharp cry. Someone dropped a wine glass. And then silence. Except for the sound of heavy footsteps, scraping across cobblestone. Brandon. Disheveled. Sleeves rolled halfway up. A bouquet in one hand and a familiar red velvet ring box in the other. The same box I had thrown away that rainy night after my birthday. "I found it," he said, breathless. "Olivia, I found it." My throat closed. My fingers clenched the bouquet tighter. "I got rid of her," he continued, stepping forward. "Vanessa. The drinking. The lies. It's all over. I cleaned up. I fixed it. We can start again." Ethan stepped forward instinctively. Brandon held up a hand. "I'm not here to fight." Ethan didn't move. Brandon turned to me, his eyes glistening. "I stayed up every night thinking about you. I waited, Liv. I told everyone, I told them you'd come back." "You were wrong," I said quietly. He blinked. "You're just confused right now," he tried again. "He's not me. You don't know what you're doing. You and I, we were everything for 10 years. You were everything to yourself," I replied. "I was just the placeholder." Brandon's face twitched. "I missed you," he whispered. "Then you shouldn't have left me crying in the rain on my birthday." He stepped closer. Ethan moved with him, and suddenly the tension cracked like lightning. "Back off," Brandon snapped. "This is between us." Ethan didn't speak, but the look in his eyes was enough. "You think you won?" Brandon sneered. "You think because she's lonely and running from her past she'll stay with you?" That was it. Ethan lunged. Brandon shoved him first, and within seconds fists were flying. Guests screamed. Chairs crashed to the ground. The priest stumbled back in horror as Ethan tackled Brandon to the stones, punching him hard enough to draw blood. "You abandoned her," Ethan roared. "You don't get to show up now." Brandon threw a punch. Hit Ethan's jaw. The fight spiraled into a blur of desperation and rage, until I stepped forward. "Stop." I held out my hand, not to pull them apart but to reveal the truth. My palm rested on my stomach. And everything stopped. The entire courtyard froze. Ethan scrambled to his feet, blood on his knuckles, breathing hard. Brandon sat up slowly, his shirt torn, lip bleeding. And both men stared at me. "You're," Ethan whispered. I nodded. Brandon's voice cracked. "You're pregnant." I swallowed. "Yes." "With?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Ethan stepped toward me slowly, as if afraid I'd vanish. "You didn't tell me," he said, voice shaking. "I didn't know until last week." He looked stunned. Not angry, just stunned. And then he smiled. Brandon, on the other hand, looked like someone had torn his heart from his chest. "You're having his child," he said flatly. I nodded again. I waited 10 years for you, he whispered. I gave you everything. You gave me pain, I replied. And I loved you anyway. For a decade, Brandon. I held on when you didn't. I forgave you when you didn't deserve it. And you made me a fool. But it only took me 2 months to fall in love again, I said, turning to Ethan. Because for once I wasn't begging to be chosen. Brandon stood dazed. You don't mean that. I do. He looked around. Everyone was watching. Everyone had heard. The girl who was once his, now standing tall in a silk dress, ring on her finger, a child in her womb that wasn't his. The girl he thought would wait forever. Had walked away. The priest hesitated. Should we continue? I took a breath, smoothed my dress, and looked into Ethan's eyes. I do. His mouth parted. The softest breath escaped him. And he whispered, I do too. The priest stumbled through the rest. We kissed. And the guests cheered. Except one. Brandon stood frozen in place, shoulders sagging, eyes empty. When I looked back a final time, he was still there, holding the red box in both hands like it might still mean something. It didn't. And I was done pretending it ever had. I always thought letting go would feel like fire. Like rage. Like a door slamming so loud it echoed across every year I wasted. But in the end it felt like a whisper. Like a sigh. Like closing a book I finally outgrew. The wedding passed, and with it the chaos. Florence returned to its quiet rhythm. Espresso in the mornings, rain in the afternoons, golden light bleeding through curtains at dusk. Ethan and I fell back into the life we were building. Slower now, more deliberate. We talked about everything. The baby, the collection I was preparing, his upcoming studio mentorship. But we also didn't talk about some things. Like Brandon. Like that ruined red velvet box. We didn't need to. That chapter had written itself to its end. I spent mornings sketching, my hands steadier than they'd ever been. My lines had purpose now. Not to impress anyone. Not to earn approval. But to express. My designs no longer chased a man's praise. They were mine. Ethan would sit across from me at our long shared desk, sometimes pretending to critique my color palette, sometimes stealing glances like he still couldn't believe I was his. On Fridays we'd eat pasta with our fingers while watching design documentaries and arguing about which silhouettes aged worst. He swore it was peplum, I disagreed. It was quiet. And real. And nothing like the life I'd known before. Pregnancy made everything sharper. I was hungrier. Sleepier. Slower. But I was more aware of my body than ever. Of what it meant to grow life. Of what it meant to protect it. I didn't feel like a glowing goddess. More like a bloated turtle with mood swings, but Ethan treated me like I was carved from starlight. He cooked, cleaned, Googled every craving I mentioned in passing. He read parenting books in bed, murmuring aloud facts I pretended to ignore just to hear his voice. You know, he said one night, the baby can hear us now. Oh yeah. I teased. And what brilliant dialogue are we offering? Mostly me apologizing for accidentally overwatering the herbs again. We laughed. And I felt safe. A few weeks after the wedding, the phone rang. The name on the screen made me pause. Derek. Brandon's old friend. One of the last ones who hadn't blocked him. I didn't pick up right away. But something in me, some tired curiosity, pressed accept. Olivia. His voice was careful. Hesitant. Like he wasn't sure who he'd reached. Yes. Pause. It's Brandon, he said. He was hospitalized. Alcohol poisoning. Self-inflicted cuts. He's stable now, but it was bad. Really bad. I didn't speak. I didn't feel anger. Or fear. Or anything sharp. Just quiet. He kept saying your name, Derek added. Even unconscious. So I said nothing. Look, I'm not calling to guilt you or anything, he said. I just thought you'd want to know. That's all. I nodded, though he couldn't see me. Hey, I said. Thanks for calling. Then I hung up. Ethan found me on the balcony a few minutes later, wrapped in a shawl, my tea growing cold on the railing. He didn't ask. He didn't press. He just slipped his hand into mine and stood beside me, eyes on the city. What do you see when you look at Florence? I asked after a while. He considered it. Stone. And sky. And 1,000 things still waiting to be built. I leaned into him. Good, I whispered. Because I'm done looking backward. Later that night, while Ethan slept, I sat at our kitchen table with a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I didn't write because I missed Brandon. I wrote because there were things I'd never said. And now I didn't need to say them aloud. Just needed to release them. Dear Brandon. For years I thought love was what we had. Messy, loud, cruel sometimes, but always burning. I thought if I heard enough, if I stayed long enough, it would mean something. But it didn't. Love isn't suffering. It's not silence when you're crying or apologies made only when someone leaves. It's not the hope that tomorrow will be different again. I don't hate you. I don't want revenge. I just want peace. And I finally have it. I hope someday you do too. Goodbye. I didn't sign it. I didn't mail it. I folded it once, slid it into a drawer and left it there, tucked between loose threads and old receipts with the other things that no longer served me. That night, I lay in bed with Ethan's arm draped over my belly and his breath soft against my shoulder. I didn't think about the decade I'd lost. I thought about the life I was growing. The man beside me. The woman I had become. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without dreaming of the past. Because I had finally let it go. There was laughter in the air. Not the kind that covers tension or tries to patch up pain. Real laughter. Deep, easy rolling joy. And it was mine. My mornings began with warm sunlight spilling onto white sheets, the smell of fresh bread wafting in from the street below, and the occasional shout from the vendor across the piazza arguing over oranges. Florence had its rhythm and somehow I had become a part of it. Ethan was already in the kitchen pretending, again, to be a barista. Tell me, he said with utmost seriousness one morning, what is the emotional tone of your cappuccino today? Quiet confidence, I said, rubbing my belly. With a touch of cinnamon. He raised an eyebrow. So, like you but with foam? Exactly. We had gotten so good at this living, this loving, that sometimes I caught myself laughing for no reason at all. Just because joy, it turns out, doesn't need an invitation. Sometimes it shows up in mismatched socks and pasta sauce smeared on your boyfriend's cheek. Correction. Husband. Yes, we got married again. Properly this time. Paperwork signed, rings resized, a baby bump present and accounted for. It was just us, a courthouse, a bouquet Ethan had made from flowers he claimed he didn't kill, and a very confused Italian judge who had to pause mid-vows because Ethan tried to sneak in a pun. I, Ethan Walker, take you, Olivia Hayes, to love and to cherish, to sketch with and to suffer through IKEA furniture assembly with. Sir, the judge said, raising a hand. Please. Legal vows only. We barely made it through the rest without snorting. Afterward, we had lunch at a hole-in-the-wall restaurant where the chef mistook me for a local actress and gave us free tiramisu. I didn't correct him. Ethan never let me forget it. My wife, he'd say dramatically, the international star of creme brulee and couture. My fashion collection launched in the spring. It was called Reclaimed, a mix of minimalist designs with subtle embroidery in the shape of quiet things. Closed hands, soft stars, broken lines mended with gold thread. It sold out in 3 weeks. Ethan claimed full credit, obviously. It's my influence, he'd say, lounging dramatically across the couch while I rolled my eyes. The muse behind the madness. You're the one who shrunk my pants in the dryer, I'd remind him. Exactly. Inspiration strikes in all forms. We joked. We played. We kissed in grocery store aisles and danced barefoot in the studio. Some days were slower than others, some more tiring. I was growing a tiny human after all. But through it all, Ethan never let go of my hand. Literally. At 7 months pregnant, I waddled. He called it gliding with dignity. Do not patronize me, I growled one afternoon, attempting to bend and pick up my pen. He swept in like a knight, dramatically of course, scooping it up and kneeling at my feet. I am at your service, O waddling queen. I threw a pillow at his head. Miss. He laughed. Your Majesty, I believe the royal aim is off. Wait until I have ankles again, I muttered. He grinned. Worth the wait. The baby shower was a blur of soft colors and even softer cake. Friends flew in from all over. Nicole cried when she saw me. Rachel nearly tackled Ethan when he brought out custom cookies shaped like tiny sketchbooks. Everyone kept guessing the baby's gender. We hadn't told anyone. Not even ourselves. Ethan said it was the best kind of surprise. Life already threw you every plot twist possible, he said. Let's let this one be sweet. We got baby gifts wrapped in neutral tones. Little booties. Handmade blankets. A onesie that said, designer in training. Ethan framed it. Of course he did. At 3 a.m. on a Thursday I went into labor. I punched Ethan awake. Hospital, I hissed. Already, he groaned. I thought the baby liked me. They like you fine, I said, clutching the headboard. They're just not fond of staying inside my ribcage. He jumped out of bed so fast he forgot pants. We made it to the hospital with 36 minutes to spare. I won't lie, labor wasn't magical. I swore, I screamed, I may have threatened to leave Ethan if he ever looked smug again. He never stopped holding my hand. And when I finally heard the first cry, tiny, sharp, alive, I broke down completely. Ethan kissed my forehead, tears slipping down his cheek, and whispered, "They're here." We named her Lily, after my favorite flower, and because she bloomed at the end of a very long winter. The first time I held her, everything inside me went quiet. Not numb, not like before. Just full. Complete. She had my nose. Ethan's eyes. A little furrow between her brows that made her look perpetually unimpressed. She gets that from you, Ethan said, staring at her like she held the universe in her hands. No, she gets her taste in men from me, I teased. Poor kid's doomed. He kissed my temple. Then she's luckier than she knows. We brought her home a week later. Ethan tried to assemble the crib. It didn't go well. IKEA is the final boss of fatherhood, he muttered, holding an extra screw like it was a personal attack. I laughed so hard I cried. And then Lily cried. And then we all cried. But it was the happiest noise in the world. One night, while Lily slept curled in my arms and Ethan dozed on the couch, I sat alone on the balcony with a blanket around my shoulders. Florence glowed beneath the stars. The street lamps flickered like whispers. The rooftops curved like arms holding the city in a cradle. I thought about where I'd started. The girl who waited for a man to come home. The woman who ran away in the rain. And the mother who now sat here holding the future. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need closure. I needed love. And I found it, not in someone saving me but in someone standing beside me as I saved myself. They thought I'd be broken forever. But I just needed a new beginning. And the right hand to hold. The end.